Hi, I'm Salarah Starre and welcome to the Salarah Starre podcast. With over 20 years of experience, I've had the privilege of working with thousands worldwide and sharing my expertise across various media platforms. This podcast is your go-to resource for mastering manifestation and unlocking your ultimate magnetism. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode, and let's dive in. And a very warm welcome back. Salarah here. As always, it is beautiful to be with you. We're having a little bit of a heat wave here in the UK, and it is absolutely beautiful because as I'm recording this, I'm looking out of the window. We've got the clearest powder blue skies. The roses are in full bloom, and after I have uploaded this episode, I'm going to go and sit out in the sun and have a nice cup of tea. It's absolutely beautiful. I've been pondering a little bit about the content of the episode today, and I had a few things that I was playing with, and I landed on one particular topic, which I think is actually going to be quite important, because I know a few of you have been listening to my podcast for quite some time. Some of you might be new. And what I found came into my awareness is that even though I share a lot about teachings and wisdom and insights and tools and perspectives and reflections, I haven't really spoken about myself, about who I am, about where I'm from, about what led me to the coaching space in the first place, and why this work matters so deeply to me. So I think it'd be really nice to share an episode where I speak a little bit about my journey behind the scenes. And it's a lot of the stuff that actually people don't see. I've had quite a few emails recently off the back of some of my latest newsletters. And it's been really lovely because not only have I had some feedback on the podcast itself, I'm learning a little bit about you and what your struggles are and what it is that you really need. So thank you so much for sending those emails in. And I've also had quite a few questions from people just kind of wanting to get to know me a little bit more. And over the years, I've noticed that there's been quite similar questions, whether it's been in my coaching sessions or retreats or, kind of conversations, emails or messages. There's been quite a common thread. So I thought I would bring a few of those together. And this was inspired by a few listeners that have written in recently. So I just want to say thank you so much for that, because it really does help me to know what you're looking for, to know how I can best support you as well. I think it's really important to know the human being behind the microphone. I absolutely love it when a coach doesn't overshare, because we don't want them to kind of make it about them. But I know a little bit about them and their struggles and where they've come from, and it helps me to connect with them a little bit more, because there's so much online that appears to be like this polished perfection. I know more and more coaches are stepping more into that kind of authentic space, sharing more from their heart. But certainly from my experience over the years, it's just felt like these coaches have everything together and everything is just completely and utterly perfect. And, as much as we would want to be guided by somebody who's reached that level, we don't necessarily feel a connection with them either, because I don't know about you, but I want a coach that I know has been there in the pain that I am experiencing, that understands the issues, the problems, the struggles, that feeling of what it feels like to be frustrated, impatient, stuck, all those things that come with it. Because then I know that not only do they understand, but they also know the pathway out. So hence wanting to cherry pick a couple of the questions that will hopefully cover all of that off. And I may need to bring this into a second episode. We'll see how we get on, because I've got quite a few questions. But I've also been told over the years that one of the reasons that people connect so deeply with my work, it's because I've never really pretended to have floated down from the Himalayan mountains in a white linen and I've got all the answers. Absolutely no. I am a human. I've lived, I've hurt, I've struggled, I've repeated painful patterns and cycles perpetually. Well, it's felt like perpetually at times. I've had breakdowns, I've had breakthroughs, and so much of what I teach is born from having to walk through much of my own darkness and slowly learn how to come out the other side and come home to myself. So today, the questions that I'm going to answer are from 3 different listeners. They're all from different parts of the world, which is lovely. I've got some stats on my podcast platform, and it's so lovely to see. It just keeps growing and reaching all these different far places of the world. And I feel like a real honor that you take your time to tune into this episode. And I know that everybody listening is listening for so many different reasons. And hopefully through these questions, you'll not only get to know me a little bit more, but also maybe learn a little bit about parts of yourself too. So the first question comes from Claire in Queensland. I absolutely love Australia. I've been there 3 times. I would live there if it wasn't so far away from my family. I absolutely love it. So shout out to all of those in Australia. Claire's 42, and she mentioned that she's been listening to the podcast for around 1.5 years. And she started listening during a period of time when she was just questioning everything. She was questioning her relationship. She was questioning her career, that kind of real kind of crossroads where you look at your life and you're really taking stock. That's where Claire explains she was at. And she said the podcast has helped her to feel less alone because she likes the way that it is grounded and it is honest. And she's enjoyed listening to it. So thank you, Claire. That means an awful lot to me. And I really appreciate you opening your email with that as well. So Claire did ask me a question. She said, Salarah, you speak about manifestation and healing in a very different way to a lot of people online. Was there a moment where you realized surface level positivity wasn't enough? And the answer is absolutely yes. It took me a little while because in the very beginning, it was all super, super exciting. I had no idea that I was coming from a place of kind of preemptive striking and fear-based manifesting. But I noticed that the books that I was reading at the time were all talking about mindset and affirmations, and you got to focus on what you do want or what you don't want. And if you have a negative thought or feeling, you just say cancel that and choose something more aligned, and play games like wouldn't it be nice if, and finish the sentence with all the things that you desire, and meditate, and all of that stuff is amazing. So I just want you to know that I'm absolutely not knocking that, because alongside all of that, I absolutely did raise my vibration. But I did notice that it was actually quite hard work. I had to say affirmations over and over and over. I had to visualize, and it felt like I had to work quite hard to do that work. And it was actually quite exhausting because my nervous system, unbeknown to me at the time, was already fried, and I was slowly on my way to burnout. So the more I was pushing, the more I was trying, the more I was trying to tick all the boxes of all these different strategies and tips and tools and workbooks, and I was slowly starting to burn myself out. And as much as I believe that absolutely our thoughts, our energy, our focus, and our mind shape our reality, what I started to notice was also a huge disconnect. And I noticed that I used to ask myself things like, does this have to be this hard? Like, surely there has to be an easier way to get the same outcome rather than me having to push and do so much work. So I was saying affirmations all day long. In fact, I wore a badge of honor for the amount of affirmations I said in one day. But underneath that, I was in fear. I was wired. I was terrified. And a lot of what I was doing, as I say, unbeknown to me, I didn't realize that I was trying to stop something I didn't want from happening. So I wasn't really coming at it from an open and non-attached, playful space. I was coming at it from a place of need and desperation and a deep desire to feel a sense of safety in life. So as much as I was trying to manifest love, I was also feeding the feeling of being unsafe because I was grasping at it so hard. And I was trying to manifest abundance, but at the same time, I was so scared of losing money. I was so scared of not having enough money. I was so frightened. And I also had religious shame around money. And so it was almost like, if you imagine an iceberg, the surface of the iceberg was, just think positive thoughts, and money comes to me easily and effortlessly, and I'm a money magnet, and I'm a trust fund baby of the universe. And now, don't get me wrong, they were fun and they got me to a certain point. But because underneath the tip of the iceberg and all the main body of the iceberg that's underwater, that was built on foundations of, like I say, the worry and the fear and the lack of safety. So as much as I was trying to be positive, I was actually bypassing dealing with all the fear in my system. I was bypassing dealing with grief, things that had happened when I was younger, which fed into these kind of fears. I wasn't dealing with the trauma. I had a whole bank of resentment. I was exhausted. I had all these childhood wounds. So yes, the affirmations, the visualizations, the journaling, all of that got me to a certain point. But unless I then went beyond the surface level manifesting and started dealing with some of the deeper hurt and pain and grief and trauma in my nervous system, it would mean that I would probably have to continue to work as hard as that perpetually, but my body would just give up at some point and need a break, because actually that kind of manifesting was quite exhausting. So I also realized at some point that manifestation isn't just about what your conscious mind wants. If it was just about that, that would be amazing. It would be easy. We'd all have what we want. But it's also about what your body believes is safe to receive. Because if you have been listening for a little while, you'll hear me refer to your nervous system will only ever accept the familiar. And if chaos is familiar, it will just keep accepting that. And if calm and peace and abundance isn't familiar, it's going to do what it can to protect you from it. Not because it's bad and not because you don't deserve it. It's because it's unfamiliar. And when I started to understand all of this on a deeper level, it absolutely changed everything for me. And thank heavens as well, because the type of manifesting I was doing was extremely exhausting. I could no way have kept that up. And I started noticing in my coaching practice and the retreats and when I was doing talks around the country that so many of us were manifesting or are and have been manifesting from fear unknowingly, of course. Manifesting from the fear of not having enough, manifesting from survival, manifesting from wounds, trying to avoid pain rather than genuinely aligning with desire. And like I say, I did that for years. That's why I kind of know what that's about. You've got to go there to know there. So I absolutely know what that feels like. I have found my way out of that. Hallelujah. And I work a lot in my coaching practice now to help other people move from that survival space and into that more expansive, effortless manifesting space where it becomes so much easier because it's your energy which is the magnet. And if your energy is calm and present and at peace and has dealt with layers of trauma, you're not going to have to work as hard. In fact, I don't hardly have to say I didn't have to anyway, but say any affirmations to the extent that I used to, any of the visualizations to the extent that I used to, because my energy shifted and changed. And it means I don't have to work as hard. So I spend more time now enjoying life, being really present with my dogs, in my garden, with the wildlife that I've kind of adopted on the land, with Nick, with my family, with my friends, and being present and really enjoying those moments. Enjoying is an operative word there, like feeling joy and feeling peace and feeling connection. That attracts more of the same. Because remember, what you give out, you get back. And if you are emanating an energy of peace and joy and presence, you're going to attract more peace and joy and presence and all the other stuff that comes along with it. So that's such a great question, Claire. Thank you so much for that. She also went on to say, you've mentioned growing up around chaos and emotional instability before. How much did your own upbringing shape the work that you do now? I would say, Claire, all of it. I didn't know just how much my upbringing had affected me. And it's only as I look back now over the last 23 years of kind of being in this personal development space that I realize actually it's been very deep layers, and I'm still working through some of it now. But the more I work through some of it, the better life gets. So it's a bit like weeding the garden and a new seed and planting a new seed, weeding and seeding. And I guess it's just going to always be like that, not from a negative perspective, but as long as I wish to grow and as long as I wish to evolve, there's always going to be some old program or some new level to connect to. So the environment that I grew up in, it was extremely volatile. For those of you who don't know me very well, I was actually born in a place called Rhodesia. It's called Zimbabwe now. I was born there in 1975. So I turned 50 last year. And just the environment itself, there was a lot of political unrest. So environmentally, systemically, there was a lot of volatility. So my energy system would have subconsciously or consciously picked up on a lot of that. So it was the environment that created a lot of it, but as well as what had gone on in my family environment too. My dad had mental health issues. He really struggled with many different things. I mean, I'm not entirely sure, but there was definitely depression. I'm sure there was some kind of bipolar. There was definitely some severe mental health issues. And as a result of that, he would shift and change. Like one minute he would be so much fun to be around and so funny. And then the next minute his eyes would just go black and he would just change completely. And that was very difficult to be in an environment like that. We all lived in fear. My mum was physically abused, emotionally abused, and all of this was in front of us as well. So there was a lot of trauma witnessing my mum suffering and being completely helpless to be able to do anything for her. And so that was challenging. And it basically went on like that for years and years and years until my mum finally asked him to leave when I was 16 years old. She would have asked earlier, but we'd moved country. So we moved from Zimbabwe, I was going to say Rhodesia. Zimbabwe, it was Rhodesia then, to Johannesburg. And then we moved to England in 1986, which are the worst storms in 100 years. So imagine landing here at that, everything was dark and bleak and fence panels were blowing all over the place. And it was really super challenging. My dad's mental health actually took a massive decline then as well. So it wasn't quite as easy as leaving. My book's just about to be published, actually. So if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about me, but also tips and tools on how to overcome your own pain and move through patterns and cycles, which, are keeping you living a life that you kind of probably done with now. You want to reach a new level of peace and freedom. That's going to be published on the 18th of June. And I'm so excited to share that with you. So keep an eye out for that. I do share some more stories about my upbringing, which have shaped me. And there's some quite valuable lessons in there that my intention is for them to help you too. So there's a lot of emotional pain growing up and a lot of dysfunction. And as a child, that creates a huge amount of hypervigilance, insecurity. And I was just constantly felt like I was hyper aware of everybody else's emotions, having to rescue people. I felt like I had to keep my mum safe. My nervous system was just constantly scanning the whole time. And of course, I was young. I kind of needed that feeling of stability and safety. And unfortunately, it just wasn't there. My mum did the best she could. I don't have any resentment or pain or ill feeling rather to anybody, because I know everybody was doing the best they could with the understanding and the awareness that they had at the time. And that's not me brushing over it. I've done a lot of work on that. But equally, it did leave me with a lot to overcome within myself, which is what led me to do what I do. And I started noticing that as I was sharing my work and as I was overcoming some of my own pain and some of my own trauma, I would use some of the information that I gathered in those dark spaces of my own mind and how I overcome them. I started sharing them with other people and it was helping them. And more people started coming. The more I grew, the more I could help other people grow. And it felt like a lot of the stuff that I'd been through, it wasn't just for nothing. At least I could use that to help other people. It's that kind of saying, you can turn your garbage into your gifts. And that has been a massive reward for me, being able to then pay that forward and help other people as a result of it. So yeah, growing up, it was tricky. And I've got so much more to say on that. Again, there is more of it in the book. I'll share more over time in these episodes as well. But, when you're living in a volatile household, you learn strategies to keep yourself safe, to keep the peace, how to protect yourself emotionally, how to avoid conflict. And that absolutely creates survival mechanisms. It also creates more wounds. So not only are you surviving from wounds, but the survival mechanisms are creating more of them. So there's been quite a lot to unpick over time. That's probably the easiest way to say it. And I think a huge part of my work now, it comes from understanding what it feels like not to feel seen, not to feel emotionally safe, not to feel heard, what it feels like to feel alone and to feel responsible even for other people's emotions. And also, without knowing it, abandoning myself left, right, and center in order to maintain connection, in order to maintain a feeling of feeling wanted, needed, good enough, etc., etc. So when I work with people, I'm not just hearing their words when we work together. I can often feel the pattern that is living underneath it. And that's because I've been there myself. So again, you've got to go there to know there. And I feel that a lot of the work that I've done has also helped me to relate to other people on a really deep level as well. I also think that's why I'm so passionate about helping people to take responsibility for their healing, not to shame themselves, not for being bad or for being wrong. You know, these are coping mechanisms that have been developed through trauma and through pain. Because most of these patterns, they begin as protection anyway. So that's kind of like a long-winded way of saying it. There's a lot more to say on that, Claire, but thank you for asking a little bit more about me as far as that goes. And finally, she also says, what's one of the deepest or hardest patterns you've personally had to work through within yourself? Oh, my goodness. There's been quite a few. Okay, so I'm trying to cherry pick the biggest one. I would say when I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in 2015, that was a massive wake-up call, because I didn't realize just how much my trauma and my wounds had got so deep into my system, and how long my body had been holding and coping till it just couldn't do it anymore. If you understand the mind-body connection and you're familiar with the works of like Louise Hay, the book You Can Heal Your Life, and some other great authors, you'll understand that a lot of what goes on for us physically is emotional suppression, whether it's fear, whether it's guilt, whether it's I'll say abandonment, but there's loads of different areas that I could talk about on that one. So I want to just make sure that I stay on track here. So I would say that was a very defining moment for me, because I absolutely knew that I needed to look at the hurts, the pains, and the traumas that had been living so long in my system silently beneath the surface. And I could know my body could no longer hold them anymore. So I would say within that is people pleasing, not knowing, of course, over functioning, self-sacrificing, trying to help and rescue so many other people, unbeknown to me that it was actually me that I needed to rescue myself in that time too. So I would say feeling just not feeling seen and not feeling heard on such a deep level that I went to such great lengths to feel seen and heard, but to the point of self-abandonment, to the point of moving further and further away from myself. And of course, the real healing came from me coming home to me, but I spent so much of my time outside of myself, trying to fix everything out there, trying to fix everybody, but actually all the time I was crying inside of me. And that's why my book is so poignant, because I share in there the only way for us to be able to really make some deep traction on healing, so the iceberg side of things, is for us to come home to ourselves. And my book is very much centered on a lot of that. I could have written 2 or 3 books, to be honest. So we'll call this next book kind of level 1, if you like, and then I'm going to need to add to it because there's so much more I've learned since. So I think for such a long time, I equated being needed with being loved. And that was the only way that I felt loved, was if I was needed. And that in itself is absolutely exhausting, because I would overextend. I would try and fix things for people. I would constantly try and rescue people. I carried pain and emotions and problems that weren't even mine to carry. I would anticipate other people's needs. I would become hyper responsible emotionally, but I would take responsibility for other people and their pain as well. And underneath it, I just had a very deep fear that if I stopped doing all of that, maybe I wouldn't be noticed. Maybe I wouldn't be seen. Maybe I wouldn't be loved. And that's a painful thing to admit out loud. But I know that many people will relate to that. So one of the biggest shifts for me has been learning that healthy love, it doesn't require self-abandonment. In fact, quite the opposite. And I've noticed that has the ability to rewire everything. Relationships, boundaries, healthy boundaries. I speak up for myself a lot more now than what I used to. Work, receiving, resting, self-worth. Even your ability to manifest, because you stop trying to prove, you stop trying to push. When I started noticing some of these unhealthy patterns and I started working with healing them, I'm like, I really don't need to be doing that anymore. Okay, so what is there now? And what there has been all along, I just wasn't able to see it because of the lens I was looking at life through. But now I'm not looking at it through that lens anymore. There's so much beauty in my world. And I feel like I have a lot more healthy relationship with myself and everybody else around me as well. So Claire's final question is, when people listen to you now, they hear someone very grounded and self-aware, but who were you before all of this work? Because I kind of feel I've mentioned a little bit about that, but I'll go more into teenage years and beyond. And I was just lost. I was such a lost soul. I ended up getting in with the wrong crowd. I don't really like that saying, because I don't believe that there's such a thing as a wrong crowd. I believe that there's such a thing as a wounded crowd. So I ended up taking a whole host of recreational drugs. And quite honestly, it was to numb. I just wanted to escape my reality, because going home was oppressive. I never knew what I'd go home to. I don't really want to go into too much detail because we'll be here for quite some time. It was awful. And at school, it was no better. Having moved from South Africa to England, I was in a completely alien environment. I had a very thick-set South African accent. I looked completely out of place, and I got bullied. There was very beautiful people at school, don't get me wrong, but there was just the odd few that took a disliking to me, would make fun of me. And I was already struggling because I was in an alien country, living in a household that was, quite frankly, awful. And then going to school and kind of being subjected to some of the stuff that happened there. So I left school one day at age 15 and I vowed never to go back. I ran across that school field. And I said I was never going back, and I never did. So I came out of school with no qualifications either. There was no way that I was going to be able to see out my school life with everything going on at home and everything going on at school. It was a recipe for an absolute nightmare for me. So at the time, it was the right thing to do. I've got loads of qualifications since then. I actually thought that I didn't like learning. I thought that I wasn't very clever and that I didn't like learning. Actually, later on in life, I'm realizing, I love learning. I just love learning things that interest me. I love being in environments that are uplifting and supportive and positive. And that was very different to what it was like for me when I was younger. So I did end up learning. I still am. I spend years doing different courses and qualifications. I absolutely love it, but it's stuff that interests me and lights me up in environments that make me feel good. So in a nutshell, through my teenage years, I was probably, you could have branded me a child from hell. I wasn't really a child from hell. I was lost. I was lonely. I was unheard. I wasn't seen. Yeah, I would put on a good, brave face. It maybe looked like I was okay and had everything together, but actually that was an act. I was falling apart underneath all of it. And then that mirrored in a lot of my relationships going forward. Again, I share a little bit about a few other milestones that happened during that time too. So anyway, when my daughter was born in 2001, I don't know, I was 26. I was going to say 2026. I'm like, well, no, she's 25. So anyway, my maths was just off then. That's why I hesitated. When my daughter was born in 2001, I really did need to just sort myself out, basically. And I didn't really know that at the time. It's been a slow kind of journey of understanding that. She's 25 now. So it was when she was like 4 or 5, I started noticing that she was mirroring some of me. And that was very painful to see and witness. And I just did not want her to experience the life that I had. I know everyone's lives are very different. I didn't want to project my issues onto her. It wasn't a case of that, but it was a case of I really needed to sort myself out, because a lot of the time what goes on with our children is a reflection of where we're at and the energy that they are in too. So she's been an amazing gift to me. She has given me an amazing opportunity to really look at myself and do some much deeper work. And she's so beautiful. I'm so proud of her, because before her, I abandoned myself. I ignored my body. I ignored my mind. I abused my body. I abused my mind. I pushed through exhaustion. I wasn't very loyal to myself as far as that goes. I wasn't very kind to myself as far as that goes either. And I would constantly look outside of myself for validation and for safety and for certainty. Just, of course, the more we do that, the more we are reinforcing that we're not safe and we're not worthy and such like. So thanks to Holly, she was a massive turning point for me. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have is that healing suddenly turns you into the Zen human who never struggles again. I've had quite a few of my clients over the years say, I thought you'd have everything all together. Doing what you do, I'm quite surprised that you X, Y, and Z. And yeah, I think I don't know any coach. I don't know any human that absolutely has everything together. And a lot of the teachers that I have the most resonance with are teachers that have been through deep, dark struggles and come out the other side and have moved beyond the versions of themselves that kept them limited. Those ones are those kind of teachers are the ones that inspire me the most. And like I said earlier on in the episode, I would much rather work with a coach who, yes, I think qualifications and such like are important. It's important to have ethics and frameworks and such like, but equally, if I know a coach has gone through struggles and has made it through and has moved beyond and done amazing in their life and has healthy relationships and healthy finances and healthy friendships and all of the stuff that comes with that, I'd much rather learn from them. So I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. So do I still have human emotions? Was not a question from Claire, but a question from someone. Yes, I do. I still get triggered. I still have moments where old patterns knock on the door. Sometimes they pound on the door. Sometimes they break the door down. But now I can see them, and now I know that they are valuable. I know that they are the ticket to my next level. I know that they're not here to break me. They're not here to show me that I haven't moved forward and I'm that I'm not going to ever get where I want. No, they are opportunities as far as I'm concerned. So whenever I'm triggered, I don't always see that straight away either, by the way. I get lost in the trigger sometimes, but afterwards I'm like, right, okay, so what is this here to show me? How is this here to help me? What is this here to help me see about myself, about my life? Where is it that I need to put in a boundary? Where is it that I might be people pleasing? How have I invited this in? And all of it is a gift. And that's not being happy, clappy, Pollyanna. That's just learning a healthy mindset so that we don't get lost in this lower vibration, negative stuff. We can see it for the opportunities that they are without bypassing our feelings along the way. I do mention a bit about bypassing in my book as well. So that might be useful to you. So I'm going to read a couple more. I've got so many more questions. I'm just mindful that this episode could end up quite long. So let me just answer a couple of more questions. We've got James, and James is from Manchester, and he's 38. And he said he discovered the podcast through one of his relationship episodes. So I'm guessing what you mean by that, James, is that you had challenges in your relationship and then you were kind of seeking, which is usually the way people find this kind of work. He said he normally struggles with spiritual content, and it can feel disconnected from real life. But he really liked the podcast because it's blended with emotional awareness and a bit of grounded psychology. Kind of highlighted the word grounded there, but also with some practical reflection. So thanks for that, James. That's really important for me to know that, because I do think we want to make this accessible, understandable, and definitely achievable. And I think there's so many different teachings out there, and there's different strokes for different folks. So it's not about one being right and one being wrong. It's just where you feel most drawn to, I guess, isn't it? And I personally like the more grounded, psychological, spiritual kind of take on things, because I never really wanted this work to ever be detached from real human experience. So James's question is, you've got qualifications and certifications, but you also talk a lot about lived experience. What made you decide to pursue formal training alongside your own life experience? I think in the early days, I didn't know that I didn't know. I was going through pain myself. So I would then seek out things to help myself. And it was within that seeking out of something, I would see the value in it. And then I'd want to get qualified in it so I could learn about that, learn about how to do it properly, and then help other people. So that's kind of like how I've done it. It was never about trying to look impressive, although I would probably say in the early days, it wasn't necessarily about impression. It was more about my own confidence that I knew what I was talking about. Because even though I had gone through so many different experiences and I felt qualified from an embodied perspective, I did need a healthy framework to guide other people. I think that is really, really important. I didn't understand enough about the psychology type space to make sure that when I was holding space for people, it was a healthy space for them without things like transference and other bits and bobs that can sometimes murky the water in a coaching and therapeutic space. And also, I just love learning. I wanted to understand human behavior. I wanted tools. I wanted frameworks. And I also wanted certain language to use that would help other people. I wanted to understand different perspectives as well, because I'm very aware that I'm looking at the world through my own lenses, through my own beliefs, my own wounds, and I'm not necessarily seeing everything as it is. I'm seeing it through the lens of who I believe that I am. So by doing some of this work, it would also help me then to understand that more in order to help my clients. But I also felt a healthy sense of responsibility for holding space for my clients and holding space well. If I was going to guide people through emotional work, for helping them with their mindset and the kind of deeper subconscious dive, I wanted proper training alongside my lived experience, of course. But equally, some of the wisest and most transformational people I've ever met, they don't necessarily have letters after their names. And in some highly qualified people that I see, when I've explored looking for help for myself in the past, there's been lack of emotional intelligence. There's been lack of emotional depth. There's been lack of embodiment, especially in the early stages with my rheumatoid arthritis. I would notice that a lot of the advice that I was getting from people were people who hadn't actually been through my journey. They had no idea what it felt like to wake up in the morning and not be able to move, and to have such deep fatigue, and to be able to walk 50 meters and then need to sit down. That was at the height in the beginning. It was a very scary journey. They'd have no idea about that, yet they were imparting all of this advice. So it kind of just, I didn't feel like I wanted to listen to somebody who hadn't been in my shoes, who didn't really understand what that journey felt like. So I think the magic is often in the combination of the two, preferably. So if you do want to work with a coach, I think it's always important to interview the coach. I always interview my clients before I decide to work with them or not, because I want to make sure that I'm going to be able to help them. I want to make sure that we are aligned, that there is. That's why I always offer the 30-minute free consultation. You may have heard me mention that on previous episodes, because I actually absolutely want to make sure that there is a synergy, that there is depth, that I'm going to be able to help them. So in a nutshell, yes, I've got training. I think it's important. Training gives structure. Lived experience gives depth. And embodiment, I think, gives that feeling of safety and credibility as far as the client goes. So I'm going to do, I'll finish your questions, James, and then I've got Sophie from Dublin. But Sophie, I'm going to probably come back onto your questions in another episode, just because I know that sometimes if these episodes are too long, then it may be that you would come back to it anyway. I'm probably projecting there because I like it when there's an episode, it's like 30 or 40 minutes. I'm like, oh yeah, I've listened to that. And anything longer, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to have time for that, or I don't end up finishing it. So his second question is, in fact, it's his final question. After working with so many people over the years, what patterns do you see come up again and again in human beings? I would say what everything boils down to, James, everything is pretty much not feeling good enough. Either feeling too much or not enough. I see it whenever I work with people with perfectionism, kind of character traits. I see it with people who people please, people who overwork, overgive. I see it in people who avoid, who control, who are jealous, who fear rejection, abandonment, visibility. So I'd say everything pretty much boils down to that. So many people are walking around like trying to earn their worth, trying to feel like they are good enough. Somewhere along the line, they just stop feeling inherently valuable. And a lot of the time that comes from our program when we are growing up, sadly. And it's not that our caregivers, our parents or caregivers are purposefully doing that either, by the way, because we're all doing the best that we can. Sometimes it's kind of ancestral patterns and societal and systemic type patterns that create the wounds too. But a lot of the time we stop feeling like just our existence is enough, and we have to work very hard to prove our worth. And I think so much of the healing is really the process of returning back to yourself. And that probably sounds like, a little bit woo-woo or a little bit out there, but we do. I certainly spent so much of my life looking for validation outside of myself. And that was quite an eye-opener, actually, the depth that I had been doing that. And I see a lot of people doing the same, needing people to see them in a certain way in order for them to feel like a good person or to feel good enough. I see people living deeply unhappy lives and too scared to say anything in case they get abandoned. That boils down to not being able. I could go on and on. So yeah, there's quite a lot. It's quite it's an amazing question, James. It's a lot more I can say on that, but I would say that is what is underpinning pretty much all of it. So that's it from me for today. I was just thinking if there was anything else that I could add to that. Something that I look back with quite fond memories now, actually, is I think it was around about 2003. I started teaching meditation and mindfulness classes, but we didn't have the space in our home at the time. We only had a loft, and I would get 8 or 9 people walking up the stairs, climbing up the little stair ladder into the loft at the top of our house. And you couldn't stand up in there, so you'd have to kind of almost crawl. And I'd play meditation music and guide people through meditations. Eventually, I ended up getting my meditation and mindfulness instructor training, which was great and amazing. But I had already been guiding people. It was great to have the meditation and mindfulness because I learned a lot more about the nervous systems and I learned a lot about so many different systems within that. So the actual learning, it was super, super useful. But yeah, I just remember people just going up my little loft ladder, and that's where it started. And then when I moved house, I lived in a 2 up, 2 down with my daughter Holly after my first divorce, and the lounge was tiny, and there'd be 8 or 9 people squeezing in there every Tuesday night for my law of attraction classes. And that was around about 2006. And I've just been teaching ever since then in various forms. It started a lot with Reiki and healing. And eventually I then learned emotional freedom technique, NLP, got my life coach certification, meditation and mindfulness certification. Of course, the last few years, some of you'll know, psychedelic integration coach as well. So there's a whole host of stuff, as well as getting my own law of attraction teacher training fully accredited, so I can actually train the trainer in that as well. So I actually look back and I think, considering I came out of school with nothing and it was a really chaotic start, I'm actually pretty proud of myself. And I think I'd like to end the episode on, kind of you becoming your own cheerleader as well. You looking at your life, and despite adversity and despite the challenges that you've been through, that you keep showing up. Like, just listening to this episode is telling me that you keep showing up for yourself and having that loyalty to yourself and being that cheerleader, like saying to yourself, I'm really proud of you. I know it's not been easy, and there have probably been some decisions that I wish I hadn't have made, but I learned something from that and I haven't repeated it. And for that, I'm really proud of myself for. And that's what I mean by coming home to yourself. It's partly what I mean, because that's a whole conversation in itself. So, where can you stop being so hard on yourself? Where can you be kinder to yourself? Where can you be a cheerleader? Where can you look back on your life and realize, actually, considering how challenging things have been, you've done amazing to get where you are, and you still keep showing up for yourself. So I think that's wonderful. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for now. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. It's been absolutely lovely to share this with you. I've got Sophie's questions. I'll see if I'll do that next show. I might do that in a couple of shows' time. You'll notice last week I ended up popping a meditation on. I actually was off for 3 weeks, spent 3 beautiful weeks with my beloved. And I sat down at my computer last Monday to record the episode, and it just wasn't flowing. No matter what I did, it just wasn't flowing. And I'm like, why am I trying to make something happen here? So that's why I shared the meditation in the end. But you know what? I love nothing more than just to listen to meditation when it comes to manifesting and personal development. So I thought, well, if I love it, I'm sure you will too. So I'd be very interested to know how you found that. Let me know. And I will be back with you same time next week. Take care. Bye for now. Thank you for tuning in to the Salarah Starre podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit subscribe so that you never miss out. And you can stay connected with me on Instagram at Salarah Starre. And for even more inspiration and explore my courses and coaching at salarahstarre.com. You deserve to live a deeply connected and fulfilling life. And it's only you that can make it happen.